We're on page,
That look about right.
we're on page 23.
Did we make it that far?
That's what I got. 23.
Law and liberty. Yeah, I think we did do that.
Yeah, we did, because I got, uh-huh. Yeah, we're on page 23.
Yeah, starting in part 3. All right. Okay, so this is the 1 Corinthians class. We're going to continue with that. Tomorrow night, though, we will start the critical thinking class.
I don't have it.
Okay, so let me get this on the main cam. There we go. Okay, so we're going to page 23, chapter 7 through 16, and then go to page 24.
Yeah.
Introduction. And for the students online, this is what we're using is the 1 Corinthians. There we go. Everything's reversed in that. There we go. Okay. 1 Corinthians workbook. Page 24, introduction. Now, after 6 full chapters in which he instructs and reprimands the church as to their carnality. Remember, there was a guy shacked up with his stepmom and on, factions, disunity, griping, on and on. He instructs and reprimands the church as to their carnality and the cause of it. He finally gets to the answers to the questions that the Corinthians had corresponded with him about. They'd actually sent him a letter, and he gave an answer, but he spent the first 6 chapters of that answer addressing their main problems, which were not what they even put in the letter. So now he's going to get to that letter that they had corresponded with him about. The first 6 chapters concerned problems that had come to Paul through reports about the church from others. Chapter 1, verse 11, and chapter 5, verse 1. While chapters 7 through 14 are an answer to written questions from the church itself. Because of the earlier reports of factions within the church, some said, I'm of Paul, I'm of Peter, I'm of Cephas, and so on. The church had split about 3 or 4 different ways. We can assume that the opposing factions would not have respected Paul's input, while those of the Paulican party would do so, those that said, I'm after Paul. Yeah, quiet. Go away. Okay. Moreover, however, the church at large was tired of the bickering and wanted an outside godly opinion. Paul was well known as a man of God and therefore could be believed. He had already written 1 letter to them, which God has chosen not to preserve. He did mention that about an earlier letter, but God decided not to preserve that as part of the Bible. So he had already written 1 letter to them, which God had chosen not to preserve. So it is only natural that they ask his judgment on further matters in the church. Now he's going to address marriage and celibacy. Chapter 7. Keep in mind the heathen nature of the city of Corinth as you read this segment. Temptations to practice fornication and adultery abounded on every side. It was an army town to start with. An army town to start with. And I've had friends that were in the Army and some in the Navy and some in the Air Force. And pardon the kind of crude expression, but booze and broads are part of the way of life. And the reason I use the term broads is because they weren't ladies. You don't go into a bar and find some woman that's sleeping with men around and she's not what I would call a lady. Okay? But that was the term that was used when I was younger, was the guys in the Army said, but yeah, booze and broads were everywhere. In fact, I know one woman that was on the, what did they call it? She was only like 16 years old. There was a missile base close to the town where she lived in, and they actually had a list on the bulletin board. And I can't remember the term they used. It was jailbait. Jailbait, yeah, you're laughing over there. Jailbait list. And they actually had a list of gals that they knew were sleeping with guys from the base. And they actually would take their names, get them from the guys, and post that on the bulletin board. This is jailbait. That means they're under 21 years old. Well, in that case, 18 years old was the age of consent in that state.
And so they had that same bulletin board at Vincent's University when I went to college.
At the university?
Yeah.
Jailbait.
Yeah.
I didn't know they used that. Yeah. And so this gal, she told me about it. She said, my name was on the jailbait list, and it was posted at the missile. They had a missile base close to the town where she lived in. And so that's what we had going on here at Corinth. It was an army town. Not only that, it was a town of commerce. There were hundreds and hundreds, maybe thousands of different businesses. So they were bringing in people to work in the businesses. And anytime you've got that many, thousands and thousands of people, you're going to have bars. You're going to have, when I was growing up, we used to call them cat houses, houses of prostitution. Then you had the temple, and they had 1,000 temple prostitutes. And they would you could actually go there, pay money, sleep with a prostitute, and that money went to keep the temple going. And they didn't care if you were a man or a woman. Because in Greek society, homosexuality was not an unusual thing. In fact, I've studied a bit about Greek society, and people like Plato and the other philosophers, they would talk about when two men sleep together carnally, it's not really beneficial for either one of them. But when love and knowledge passes between them, then it's okay. It builds them up. So they didn't think anything about homosexuality, lesbianism, etc., etc. That's the town of Corinth. I mean, the temple taught the people part of their religion was you could sleep with the prostitutes, but you had to pay money because that's what went to keep that going. They had 1,000 temple prostitutes. Then you've got the arming with all the drinking and going on and the whoremongering and you name it, it was going on. So that's why they sent this letter to Paul talking about marriage and celibacy. Marriage, yes. Celibacy, why? Well, because that covered fornication. At that time, if you said two women were going to get married, even when I was growing up, you could find a drunk puking in his shoes on the curb, drunk out of his mind, throwing up. And if you told him two women were going to get married, he'd look at you and say, "Are you nuts? Two men are going to get married. How are two men going to get married? Are you nuts?" So even the worst of the drunks. Yeah, pardon?
So now we have it here.
And now it's the law of the land. It's legal. All right. Have things changed much since Corinth?
No, they're still the same, just a different day.
Yeah. That's
That's
why.
what I see.
That's why one of the prophets said that there's nothing new under the sun.
No.
Well, yeah, there's television. Well, you know what? Pornography was around back then. It's not a new sin. It's just a new method of committing the old sin.
Yeah.
So when he said there's nothing new under the sun, homosexuality was not unusual back then. Abortion was not unusual back then. Those temple prostitutes, what good would they be to the temple if they got pregnant? What good would they be to the temple? So abortions were common, different ways, jumping up and down, putting them on horses, taking them on wagons, taking them over bumpy roads. There are certain plants that will, in some women, will promote an abortion. What is it? It's purple. Yeah, it's purple. I should know the name of it because my wife loves that particular plant, and I like it in when you put it in, cook it in various things. No, it's a tuber.
Oh, it's a tuber. Okay.
Oh, why can't I think of the name of it? Because she loves it.
Because you got to say it right now. That's why.
Yeah, that's why that's why I can't think of it. Yeah, it's one of the gourds, and it's about that long, and it's purple. It'll come to me in a minute. And so, in some women, eggplant.
That's what it.
Yeah, eggplant.
Okay, say gourd, so I'm like.
Yeah, purple gourd, about that big, eggplant.
Oh, wow.
And then there were other mixtures. That's why even back in BC, before Christ, when Hippocrates wrote out his code of ethics for doctors, and doctors used to have to swear to that in order to get their license in the United States and in England, other places. Now they do not, because part of the Hippocratic Oath was, I will give no potion to a woman to cause her to lose her child. He said, I won't use these medicines that can cause spontaneous miscarriage in women. He said, I will give no potion to a woman to cause her to lose her seed, I think, or whatever he called it, but he meant to cause her to lose her child. The doctors used to have to take that oath in order to get a license. They don't anymore because abortion's legal. Hopefully, and I'll get in trouble with this online, hopefully the Supreme Court will overturn Roe v. Wade.
Oh,
We've murdered 60 million babies in this country.
There's too much money out there.
Yeah, but the Supreme Court still can. But I believe the Congress can override it.
But with Planned Parenthood, it's basically free anyway.
Yeah, Planned Parenthood, they just, one of the pro-life groups just released a story about Planned Parenthood gave an abortion to, I think it was a 13-year-old girl, and then turned her back over to her 45-year-old abuser.
Oh!
The average girl that gets pregnant in her teens, about 80-90% of the time, she's a teenager, and her boyfriend that gets her pregnant is somewhere in his mid to late 20s. That's statutory rape. That's child abuse. Yeah. And so that's the average. Is generally the teenage girls do not get pregnant by another teenager. They get pregnant by an adult that's usually in his mid to late 20s, 25 to 29 or 30. In the case that just came out, the guy that got the 13-year-old pregnant was 45.
Whoa.
He brought her in, they got her an abortion, and they turned her back over to her abuser. So anyway, this was going on back then. Nothing has changed. That's the kind of town Corinth was. Back in the late 1700s, the United States was called a country of Corinthianizers because we were a nation of drunkards. And that was in the late 1700s. In the back of your Star Book for Ministers, there's a list from about the late 17 or early 1800s. People spent like 4 or 5 times more money on booze and tobacco than they gave to their local church. Like 400 or 500% more. And so that's what was going on in Corinth. And so that's why they wrote him a little letter and they said, hey, we need good godly counsel about marriage and celibacy, because our young men, when I was growing up, it was not unusual that when a boy got to be, 15, 16, 17 years old, it wasn't unusual that his dad would go out and hire him a prostitute to show him how to be a man.
Yeah, my first baby daddy.
Yeah,
Father did that.
that was not unusual. And so I liked it. There was an old saying that I read somewhere one time. A real man is not a man who romances a different woman every night. He is a man who romances one woman for a lifetime.
Yeah.
That's a real man, not somebody who sleep with somebody different. I was a musician for 25 years, so that was all part of the lifestyle when I was in that business, picking for the devil, and that's what I was doing. Okay, so keep in mind Roman numeral 1, marriage and celibacy. Keep in mind the heathen nature of the city of Corinth as you read this segment. Temptations to practice fornication and adultery abounded on every side. In fact, in the moral climate of the city, such perversions were even encouraged. Well, yeah, the church says, oh, hey, yeah, come to church and sleep with our priestesses, our prostitutes, because that'll help. Instead of paying your tithe, sleep with a prostitute, and that'll get the money in, and you'll get something for your money. I'm just, it's hard telling what they said. But I'm sure that kind of stuff went on.
So basically, the church was pimping out the girl.
That's what they were doing. We have one of those churches right here. I just mentioned it a couple of months back.
Yeah.
We have a church right here in Salt Lake City.
It doesn't.
It was a wife swapping club. But they wanted to get a tax break, so the husband and wife, he declared himself a priest and declared his wife a priestess, like of Aphrodite, the Greek goddess of love and sexuality. He declared himself a priest, declared his wife a priestess, and they started a church and got their 501c3 tax exempt status, and that's what people go to that church for. They go there to swap wives.
Swingers.
And it's a church. It's not only a church, it's a tax exempt church. Nothing new. Doesn't that sound like what was happening in the temple there? Almost, 2,000 years ago now? Almost 2,000 years ago? Same thing. Nothing new. Just new ways of committing the same old sin. Even many of the so-called Christian community practice sexual and other immorality, citing spiritual reasons of Christian liberty. Oh yeah, I'm at liberty. I'm saved. Now I don't have to worry about what I do because I'm going to go to heaven. So if I want to go out and commit adultery, if I want to go commit fornication, that's okay because God will forgive me. After all, He knows I'm human.
Better look at your salvation.
Yeah, that's the thing is, Christian liberty is not liberty to sin. If you read the book of Romans, it is liberty from sin, to do right. Because in Romans, Paul, the same one that wrote Corinthians under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, he wrote in Romans that he said, where sin doth abound, grace doth much more abound. Brother Mullins just finished teaching the Romans class. Where sin doth abound, grace doth much more abound. But should we sin? And he said, God forbid. And then he goes on to explain that Christian liberty is, we were slaves to sin, now we're set at liberty from sin, not at liberty to sin. And if you read the book of James, if you offend the law, if you offend in one point, you're guilty of the whole law. So if you're an adulterer, a fornicator, that's no different than being a murderer or a thief, or, all you got to do is commit one sin. And on, the Bible says you can tell them, you can tell what a person is by the way they live. Like the Christian Corinthians here. Oh, Christian liberty. The guy, I'm sure, that was sleeping with his stepmom would say, well, after all, I'm saved. I don't have to worry about how I live. That's how the Gnostics got in. They claimed God doesn't even know we're here. And they were a Christian, heretical Christian group. They said, God doesn't even know we're here. And I'm not going to go into that because of time. But they said, well, since God doesn't know we're here, once you accept Jesus and get saved, God doesn't care how you live. Because He doesn't know anyway. So how can He care? And so that was the Gnostics. That was very common. They were already forming churches, heretical churches, non-biblical churches, but still forming churches, and this was going on all over the world at that time. Well, they said, Christian liberty, God understands. Well, others of the Christian so-called group, influenced by Greek thought and philosophy, taught that only the spiritual mattered, thus one could indulge the flesh in any way one wanted. That was some of the Gnostic teachings. Once you're saved, it doesn't matter what you do in the flesh. It doesn't matter why. Well, because God doesn't know what you're doing anyway. Just accept Jesus and then you can live how you want. Eat, drink, and be merry. Such a licentious setting would, of course, necessitate marriage for a large majority of the Christians. Paul recognized this and instructed the church there and everywhere else accordingly. In other words, Paul said the same thing he said in other places. It's better to marry than to burn. Yes.
The licentious meaning?
Eat, drink, and be merry. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Okay. Licentiousness, yeah. Okay. In our terms, it would be sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Well, I was in the country music business for 25 years. It was sex, drugs, and country music. It's just part of that lifestyle. In fact, I used to preach and say, if you got a friend that's going to go into the professional music business, you might as well just shoot them in the head and put them out of their misery. And then I had to go, no, don't do that. I was just kidding. In other words, they're going to be miserable and it's going to kill them. So you might as well just put them out of their misery.
Yeah.
But then I had to explain, no, I'm just kidding. Don't do that.
Right,
But you understand what I mean.
right.
Yeah, because the movie and music business, in order to get into that,
Yeah.
definitely for females, you have to do
Oh, yeah.
all sorts of kind of stuff.
It's not how you act, it's who you sleep with.
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
And in the music business, it's always there. The drugs and everything. I was picking guitar one night, and I had the microphone stand, and I had a little alligator clip taped to the stand, because I've always had a hard time remembering words of songs until I've done them 15, 20 times. And so I could abbreviate a song and write it on a little recipe card.
Oh, cool.
And I wouldn't wear my glasses for vanity's sake. And so I would clip it right there and then turn it, and they couldn't really see it too much, the audience. But that close, even I could read the words. Well, I didn't have a song in the clip, and I was playing one night, and this guy was dancing with somebody. He danced by, and he said, "I don't have any money, bro." He said, "But here's something for you later." And he reached up and he put a joint in that clip.
Whoa.
He went, put a joint, and let go, and danced on away. And I looked at it, and that's what it was. It was a joint. And that's in the country music bar. When I was growing up, the drunks used to beat up the hippies for bringing marijuana into town. 10 years later, every one of those drunks was smoking marijuana.
Where did they work?
Alcohol, a little bit harder drugs. Marijuana doesn't lead to harder drugs. That is a lie.
That is a lot.
I've seen it. I played for 250,000 people in the 25 years I was in the business. And the ones in my hometown, I'm serious, they would beat the hippies up for bringing marijuana into town. 10 years later, them same drunks were all smoking and selling marijuana. It took them about 10 years to catch up. All right? And marijuana leads to harder drugs. I don't care what they say.
It does.
I've seen it.
Yeah.
They've also have done surveys and followed teenagers, and overuse of marijuana as a teenager can not only lead to learning disabilities in almost every case, it can even lead to out-and-out schizophrenia.
And
Marijuana?
loss as well.
Memory loss, schizophrenia,
Brain cells.
but it's legal. Now, how many parents are going to stand there and tell the kid they're smoking dope, and they're going to tell the kid don't smoke dope?
No, because most of the time the parents are smoking dope with them.
That's what I mean. The kid the parents smoking dope, but if he'll tell his kid don't. The stupidest thing I ever saw was a guy holding a bottle of Budweiser. Actually, it's Bud Dummer. He was holding a bottle of Budweiser and telling his kid don't smoke dope.
But you're drinking.
Oh, Lord.
But it's okay to drink your dope because it's a drug.
Oh, yeah.
But, and that's stupid. You're sitting there drinking your drug, telling him don't smoke your drug, and the kid's going, "Yeah, right, Dad. Okay." Whatever you say,
And
they'll
that's
agree
why-
with you.
And that's why it leads to stronger drugs, because once that feeling of you smoking marijuana for so long and
It
you
wears
don't
off.
get that feeling anymore,
Yeah.
then you're gonna find it in something else.
Yep. My wife Bonnie, when she had cancer, they put her on pain medication. It's the same way.
Yeah.
After about 6 months, the pain medication just doesn't work much anymore.
Don't.
So they had to put her on a higher dose.
Yeah.
Then after a while, the higher dose wouldn't work. They had to put her on oxycodone, which is such a strong painkiller, you can't buy it in the pharmacies in the valley. It's the most stolen drug in Utah. And the pharmacies will not carry oxycodone. We had to drive all the way up on the east side to the university because they've got security guards. And that's where we had to buy her oxycodone for her pain, because you couldn't get it in any pharmacy. People would break in the pharmacies, they wouldn't touch anything else.
Right.
They go right to the oxycodone. And so,
I've read in the study Vincent's,
Mhm.
because of special education class that I took, and one of the studies that we read was about how Adderall is just as addicted as cocaine.
Yeah.
And they give Adderall to children. So that's automatically, you're wanting kids to stay up. It's pretty much the same thing. You're just putting it in a capsule.
it's like methadone to help you stop drinking. It's completely addictive.
Yeah.
Once you get on methadone, yeah, you don't drink. Now you're addicted to methadone.
Right.
But that's legal, and you can get it at the
You just
drugstore.
traded one for the other as argument.
Yeah, it didn't help. Didn't help cure
No, that's
your
why you just
addiction. It
trade
just
one for the
changed
other.
your addiction. So this was all this same stuff. You got to realize these drugs were that we hear about today. They're nothing unusual.
No.
drink Coke. Drink Coca-Cola. It'll give you a lift. You know why?
Used to have cocaine.
It had cocaine in it.
Wow.
It was legal up until about the 20s. Then they finally made it was legal. They finally made it illegal. Well, yeah, it gave you a lift because it had a little bit of cocaine in it. You know, because it was, and so anyway,
No wonder it's called.
that stuff's been around.
Yeah, I was about to say.
That's been around for thousands of years. These things, they're nothing new. Maybe not exactly the same drug, but drugs just as bad.
Yeah.
Laudanum was famous in the 1800s in the United States. It was a cough medicine. And people, you could buy it at the drugstore. It was called laudanum. Wyatt Earp's wife died from an overdose of laudanum. He married another woman, but his first wife, she died of it. It was cocaine and alcohol.
Oh my.
Well, yeah, it'd stop you from coughing. Why? Blah. My throat tickles. I can't remember what I'm supposed to do about it. Well, yeah, so you don't cough. It's like smoking dope for a headache. It doesn't take your headache away. Just put your headache out here somewhere where it doesn't bother you. It's still there.
It actually spikes the levels of the pain.
The chemicals in alcohol produce the same brain reaction as heroin. The only difference is you got to drink a lot more alcohol to feel good, and a very little heroin, and the alcohol's legal. So, okay. So all of this kind of stuff was going on in Corinth, and so they wrote a letter to Paul. They said, hey, the young brothers and sisters that are getting saved, they're still going to the temple prostitutes. Why? Well, because they heard about Christian liberty, and it's okay. And the Native American, I did a survey, I did some research. The Native American population from Seattle to Alaska, the rate of alcoholism is 98%, starting from 4 years old and up. Why? Mom and dad get drunk, pass out, the little 4-year-old comes in, mom and dad been drinking that stuff on the table. What are they going to do?
Oh, drink it.
They're going to drink it. So by the time they're 4.5 years old, they're addicted to alcohol.
Oh.
And that's just the same kind of thing was going on in Corinth. And the people wrote him a letter and said, hey, we got new Christians that are still going to the temple prostitutes. Why? Well, because after all, Christian liberty, God understands I'm human. Drunkenness is such a way of life, and et cetera, et cetera. This particular section is extremely applicable to the entire body of Christians today. We live in a society that is sex crazy. You look at every president that God has given us.
Clinton?
Look at every president God has given us. Because remember, whether you like our current president or not, God put him there.
Yeah.
Bible says God lifted him up and God can take him down.
Yeah.
We had the sex craziness of the 80s and 90s with the hippies. Now those guys are all grown and teaching in our universities and running our big companies and that. So God gave us a president. He said, you want to find out what this sexual immorality is like? I'm going to give you a president. Just like he gave us one, I'm not going to say who, not too long ago. This country was being divided. There's no middle ground. This group thinks they're of the devil, and this group thinks they're of the devil. They're not going to talk to each other, political division. And God said, okay, let me give you a president. I'll show you what division's really like. And that's what he did. And he gave us a president that showed us exactly what division was like. He gave us another president that said that oral sex is not sex. We have to define what the meaning of is. And by the way, in the Bible, when it says avoid vain philosophy, it's talking about Jewish sophism. It's a type of philosophy where you buffalo someone with all your baloney until they finally just go, okay, whatever you say. That's called sophism. So that's nothing unusual. We have had presidents. You think that politicians are above the law? Well, then we wound up with one that got impeached because he was behind illegal breaking into the opponent that opposing political parties' headquarters and stealing their stuff. So God puts presidents in because the country will say, well, I don't care about this. And he said, I'll tell you what, I'll give you this president, show you exactly what it's really like. And that's where we're still in the same place. We're still in the same place. This current president, he's going to teach this country a lesson. Just like the last president taught this country a lesson, the one before him taught this country a lesson, the one before him, because the Bible says God puts him up. Is God stupid?
No.
Then he has a reason for every president he puts in.
Yeah.
It says he puts them in. He can take them down, too. And he's taken a few down. I remember when Nixon got impeached. They thought that everybody thought he was above the law. Well, they found out he wasn't. But it taught this country a lesson that they didn't want to trust. That's why millennials, only about 26, 29% of them trust the government. They've been lied to. They don't trust churches. They don't trust preachers. Because they've seen so many on television that wound up to be whoremongers and thieves in prison, and they don't trust preachers, they don't trust churches, they don't really trust anybody. That's why when they come to visit the church and you give them a visitor's card, most millennials will not put their address on that card. Because they think you're going to sell it to somebody and they'll come in and steal their information. They'll give you their email address, but they will not they'll put their name, but they won't put their address on a card. Why? Well, identity theft. So they don't trust the churches to keep that private. That's nothing new. All of this immorality and not trusting people, and the Christians saying, well, God understands, so I can get saved and live any way I want to. And they wrote Paul a letter and said, hey, we got a problem. And I said, this is extremely applicable to the entire body of Christians today, because we're exactly like the church at Corinth. The churches today are exactly like that. 75% of the unmarried Christians, young Christians, and even older Christians in our churches are fornicating. They're sleeping with someone outside of marriage. 75% of them. I know one preacher's son that said this. I know it for a fact because he told my wife this. He was dating this one young lady. It was a preacher's son. He was dating this one young lady. She wouldn't sleep with him, so he broke it off and got a different girlfriend.
Oh, yeah, they will.
And you know what he told my wife? He says, I won't marry a woman until I sleep with her first. I got to try her out and find out if she likes sex or not.
I've heard that so many
You've heard that? Yeah, see? It's nothing new. It's nothing new.
That's why I'm not married. It's kind of
for a
crazy
test
because
ride.
both of my daughters, because I have
Two.
my daughters have two different fathers.
Yeah.
Both of them has said that to me, and me searching for a husband and me being young and stupid. Well,
We were all young and stupid.
And
In
then-
fact, some of us are old and stupid.
They don't want you anyway.
So
They run off.
that kind of stuff is nothing new. That's why they wrote this letter to Paul. They said, this is going on in our churches.
They told
And-
me I was hard to live with.
They what?
They told me I was hard to live with, like I was tough to deal with. And I'm just like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
I do everything for you. I wash your clothes, wash
Mhm.
everything, and
They
Clean
only
the
want
house.
sex, and that's it.
yes.
That's all they're out for.
This particular section is extremely applicable to the entire body of Christians today. Yeah, that pastor's son said, oh no, I got to try a woman out before I'll ever marry her. We live in a society that is sex crazy. Instead of a beautiful gift from God of intimacy, fulfillment, a physical expression of the union of husband and wife given to a man and his wife only, it is looked upon as mere entertainment. Just one of many ways to feed the lust of the flesh and mind. In fact, if you read in 1 Corinthians, we're going to get to it. I've had preachers that have got all upset about, okay, someone was married when they were younger and got divorced. They can never pastor a church. Forget it. That'll never happen. But they forget one scripture that says, if you slept with a woman, hath not God said, they two shall be one flesh? That means if that man has slept with a woman other than his wife, he's a polygamist. He committed the act of marriage when he was fornicating.
Okay, so what would that say? I got two husbands?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what it means.
Oh man, and no ring.
Yep. So, but it's nothing new. And that church at Corinth, that's why I wanted so bad I wanted so bad to have this particular class as part of the curriculum.
Yeah.
And I talked to your brother, Pastor Warnicki Sr., and told him, I said, we have to, because I said, read 1 Corinthians. It's everything you see, not just in the lost, in our churches today. Just one of many ways to feed the lust of the flesh and mind. Even within marriage today, it is misused as a weapon, a means of control and coercion, even among Christians. I've seen pastors' wives that told that this one particular pastor's wife told her husband, until you do this, I'm not sleeping with you anymore. No more sex. Huh?
Because then she wouldn't like it if the husband said that.
He said, then I'll just go get it somewhere else.
Whoa.
And she said, go ahead, you're a pastor. It'll be the end of your church.
Oh, well, she's probably right on that.
So it's still going on today. It's nothing new.
Wow.
So it's used, it's even in marriage, it's misused as a weapon, a means of control and coercion, even among Christians. It is no wonder that Christian marriage, on the average, lasts little longer than do marriages among the unsaved. Now, it used to be, if you were both Christian and you're married, there was only like one chance out of 100 or one chance out of 200 that you would ever get a divorce. That is not true today.
So
It is 50-50. It's just as bad as the lost. In fact, many Christians divorce faster than the lost.
Why?
Because they get in the flesh, they get in an argument, I'm out of here, I won't sleep, he won't sleep with her, she won't sleep with him, we argue about finances, they get in the flesh, they wind up getting a divorce
So
over the color of the carpet on the floor. I mean, churches split over the same thing. I've known churches that split because they took up an offering to get carpet, and one of them wanted this color, one half wanted this color, other half wanted that color, and it split the church.
rainbow.
Yeah, or do like this.
Yeah.
This carpet,
Boom, 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 boom,
the
boom.
gray carpet underneath was brand new at one time. Within a month, people had tracked grease in. Candy was stuck on the floor. I cleaned it. It could not be cleaned. So I went to the thrift store and bought these carpets. It's, you know,
That works.
$10 a carpet. Looks a lot better than the big grease marks and the
'Cause you gotta
stains.
think about it. No one's looking at the carpet.
No.
Everyone's looking up.
Yeah.
So
And so, and I like them. I like them.
Works for me.
So,
I have a question.
yes.
Okay, so I know today it really wouldn't matter. But so let's just say a woman has no kids, but the man has kids,
Has what?
has
Kids.
children.
Kids. Yeah. Okay.
Would it be fine for them to get married if they're both in the church?
Why not?
Okay. I just
Yeah.
had that question. And vice versa?
I don't see any problem with that. When I married my wife Bonnie, she had two girls, 2 years old and almost 2.5, and 4 years old.
And was you a pastor then?
No, I was lost at the time, but I married her and raised those two girls. They're my girls. They're my kids. They call me daddy. I taught my children, you have a daddy and you have a father.
Yeah,
I have a daddy and a father.
it's true.
I never met my father. I was 2 years old. My mom said I met him one time. But what do you remember when you're 2 years old? I never really knew my father, but my dad raised me. And he's my dad.
Yeah.
And he'll always be my dad. He's in heaven now. He's my dad. When the older of those two daughters, when she got up to be, 18, 19, 20 years old, she was married, had children of her own. Her father decided to be part of her life. Okay, but then he started bad-mouthing me.
Ooh.
That's how they do it.
And Kimmy told him, if you want to be part of my life and part of your grandchildren's lives, that's quite all right, but don't you ever say nothing about my daddy.
Bingo.
So, because
Smart girl.
I'm the one that raised her,
Yep.
bought her food, got her
Yep.
clothes. We didn't have much. I told her a couple of years ago, I said, I'm sorry we didn't have much. She said, we knew we were loved.
Love.
That's what she said. We knew we were loved.
There you go.
And so
That's what counts.
the misuse of sex within the marriage union is a very large contributing factor. In fact, that's why in the writings of Paul we find this. The husband does not have power over his own body. and the wife does not have power over her body.
What do you mean by that?
That means when the wife needs intimacy, the husband is required by God to give her intimacy, up to and including the sexual union. But most women prefer the intimacy. They're looking for someone to hug them and love them and hold them. And so what he's saying is that if the husband denies the wife her intimacy, or she denies him his intimacy, then he said that's putting him up to the temptations of the flesh. And in fact, if you're if you're an Orthodox Jew, when the husband goes on a business trip, he can only stay gone as long as the wife tells him he can.
Be like 2 months, come on. Come back. I miss you.
Yeah. And so, because the Bible teaches that the woman is there to help the husband, and the husband is there to help the wife, so that they're not tempted by the sins. Got enough problems already. But when one of them denies intimacy, whether it's sexual or just intimacy, hugging and, when one of them denies the other, God says, that's not good. That just is opening them up to temptation. You got 1,000 prostitutes at Corinth. I'm sure they just said, okay, if you want to have sex with me, I'll just go to the temple. God will understand, because I'm saved and Christian liberty. So they wrote him that letter. It's still going on today.
So, one more question.
Yes.
So, would you say, because you've been married a long time?
Now, I was married to Bonnie for 34 years before she went to heaven. And I've been married to Gracia we just had our 17th wedding anniversary just a couple of days before Christmas.
Wow, that's a long time.
17 years.
So would you say...
We're both Christians, and we decided two things. God doesn't approve of divorce, and murder's illegal. So we're going to work it out.
There you go. Right? So would you say having intimacy and just like the hugging and the...
Yeah, the intimacy,
just like
loving, and
hugging, kissing, all that
yeah.
stuff.
My wife doesn't want to go to sleep at
sexual.
night until I stroke her face and rub her head and rub her shoulder and scratch her back and hug her and rub her arm and just and that's it. I mean, that's intimacy. See?
So would you say if younger people in my generation, because I'm only 27, if we have more intimacy in our life, would we be less tempted on the sexual part?
Yeah. Men, okay, this is part of what I teach in counseling. Men give love. Now, this is the unsaved man. We can overcome it as Christians. But the natural man. Men give love to get sex.
Yep.
Women give sex to get love. If a wife, there's a preacher in this valley, his wife some years ago ran off with somebody else in the church. Everybody I talked to said, well, yeah, she's just a nympho or something. She ran off with another man. And my answer always was, why did she run off? My mom used to always say it takes two to tango.
Yeah.
It is never one person's fault. Now, there may be one that's 99% wrong, but the other one's probably got a 1% in there somewhere. And so if she ran off, it was probably because he was giving all of his time to his church. That's one of the problems our independent Baptist pastors, and maybe pastors of other churches have. They think the church comes first and the family second. The Bible did not give Adam a church and then later gave him a wife. God gave Adam a wife. The children are not the most important thing in the marriage. God didn't give Adam children and then give him a wife. All right? So it's the husband and wife, because without a good relationship with the husband and wife, the kids are going to be all screwed up. And they're going to see mom and dad fighting, and they think that's the way, that's normal. And then after mom and dad, then comes the children, then comes your church. Many pastors give all their time to their church, and their wife feels unloved. And I'm not saying the husband doesn't love them. It's just he does not show that love to them first. Right. Because without good marriages, we can't have good churches. Yeah. It's just not going to work. And so when she ran off with another man and, it's her fault, she divorced, and then I said, why did she run off?
Yeah, there's a reason.
There was a reason.
Yeah.
She didn't run off for sex. They said, well, she ran on was sleeping with another man and then took off with that. I said, she didn't sleep with that man for sex. She slept with that man for love. Because women give sex to get love. Men give love to get sex.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we can overcome that as Christians, but that's the natural tendency of men and women.
But the grass is not always greener on the other side.
No, because sometimes on the other side of the fence is loco weed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And not only that, whatever baggage you take from this relationship, whatever baggage you take to the next relationship is still the same baggage.
Yep.
It's not gone.
Or what it's called.
You always take it with you. Whatever caused the problems in that marriage, you took that, your part of that with you is going to cause problems in the next one.
It's like a spiritual STD.
Yeah.
It's
there.
From one.
Yeah, it's going to infect the other one. And so all that was, therefore God has instructed us as to its need for some and why, as well as the contributing factor of the moral climate in which one lives, being a consideration as to whether to marry or not. Because part of the letter was, well, should we get married or should we remain celibate? Single. Remember in the earlier class, Brother Spillman was talking about the King James Bible says a virgin conceived.
Yeah.
And the RSV says a young woman conceived.
Right.
What's the miracle in that?
No, they're not.
Happens all the time.
But Mary wasn't, she wasn't married yet.
Yeah.
Before she conceived with Jesus.
She was a virgin. Yeah. She conceived Jesus as a virgin.
Right.
And
See,
then got married.
and then got married.
Okay.
In fact, the Bible says that her husband did not touch her physically, sexually, until after Jesus was born.
Right.
The Catholics say, well, she never had another child. No, they don't read their Bible. The Bible says that they came to Jesus and said, your mother and your brethren are without. Your brothers are out there with your mom. And so, anyway, God just simply tells us that not only where we live and the moral climate there, but the temptations that are around within our own flesh or that are out there as a musician, it's always there. It's always there, period. And I don't care. I hired a violinist from the Seattle Philharmonic Orchestra. She wanted to learn how to play fiddle. You know the difference between a violin and a fiddle?
It's the same thing.
The name. That's it. And a style. The style's a bit different. So I hired her, but she started sleeping with two of the members of my band, and I did not allow that. When you joined my band, I didn't want trouble.
No.
What you did outside was your business, but within the band, no one in the band was allowed to sleep with someone else in the band. And so she slept with one of them, and then got tired of him, and I didn't find this out for a while, then started sleeping with his best friend, who was another member of the band, and this guy was going to shoot his friend. And so she knew when she joined, that was not allowed. So I fired her, and I warned both of them. If it ever happens again, you're both fired.
Right.
They must have not have known the saying, bros before H.
Um,
HOBS.
Yeah.
That's what they said in India.
I know. My mom used to say, why buy the cow if you can drink the milk for free?
Yeah.
Right?
And so she was a pretty smart old gal. And so when God talks about marriage here in these next chapters, he's saying it depends on how much you can contain, how much celibacy. Because see, in Jewish society, a young maid automatically was a virgin. If she was not a virgin, when she married, her husband would just throw her out. He'd find out she wasn't a virgin. That was it. The marriage was over. He'd divorce her. Not only that, if they found out that she was sleeping around, it was called playing the whore. She was not a whore. Why? She wasn't charging for it. But she was playing the whore in Israel. And she was taken out and stoned. And if it was a married man she was sleeping with, they were both taken out and stoned. And so God is going to tell them through these next chapters that whether you should get married or not depends on circumstances. You know, how much can you contain? Do you burn in lust? Well, then you better get married. You know, find someone you love and get married. Okay?
Yeah, but
That's how it worked. Now, I'm being facetious here now. Find someone you love and get married. In the United States, that's the way it is. They don't come and ask mom and dad anymore. The man doesn't come and ask mom and dad for the hand. I did for both of my wives. For Bonnie that's in heaven now, I asked, and the teenage marriage I was involved in.
My parents still expect
That's the way it was. Divorce rates back up to like 53, 56% in the lost and in Christians both. That is a shame. I mean, that is a blot on the name of Christ. That Christians are divorcing at the same rate as the lost.
because they forget their foundation.
Well, it's because in this country, it's no big deal. It's just no big deal. Hey, there's a lot of other fish in the sea. I just heard that from someone yesterday or the day before.
Oh, yeah.
If she ran off, I just go find another one. And so, marrying out of love. But then you go back to the Old Testament, we tell people, follow your heart, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the Old Testament, it says the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. And who can know it? Yeah. The heart is, I want what's going to make me feel good. That's the natural man. And your heart will deceive, especially women. Their heart will deceive them. I rented a place for my wife, Bonnie, and I in Alaska, and we had 3 or 4 kids. And the lady that I rented from happened to be a lesbian madam.
Oh.
During the oil rush in Alaska, she ran a house of prostitution. She had one of those girls was her girlfriend. She even pimped her girlfriend. So they were lesbians. And she had saved up her money and bought a couple of houses and retired with her girlfriend. Retired and was renting those houses out to make a living. So we rented from her, and I told her something one day.
What'd you say?
I don't even remember what I said. It's her answer that I love.
What was it?
I said something to her, and she had a problem talking to adults. I heard her talking to my children. She was a nice lady. I heard her talking to my children. She didn't stutter a bit. When she talked to adults,
Oh.
she would stutter. And I said something, I don't remember what it was, and she said, baby, you ain't nothing but a smooth-talking man. In other words, you're trying to flim-flam me. You're trying to con me into something. But she had dealt with so many of those people, she could spot it. Which is, baby, you ain't nothing but a smooth-talking man. And so the temptations around and our ability to resist those temptations dictates whether we should get married or not. I mean, he's going to tell them later on, if you're unmarried, it's a lot easier to serve God. You don't have to worry about taking care of a wife, getting enough money to rent a house for you. Us guys could live in a tent under a tree. I could care. I got a motorhome out there. I could live in that thing the rest of my life. Wouldn't bother me a bit.
Hey, camper work perfectly fine.
Yeah, wouldn't bother. But most women are nesters. Most women want a home. They want security.
Yeah.
It's just the way God built them, And there's always exceptions, but these are general rules. And so if we can contain, it's better to remain single. Because you can give all your time to serving God, And a woman, same way. If she can contain and doesn't need that intimacy, I'm not talking necessarily about sex, but I'm talking about the hugging and loving and the intimacy,
Restrain from that as well?
Yeah, if she can contain from that, it'd be better for her to remain single. Why? Because she could give all her time to serving God. The Catholics took that and made that a law.
Oh, yeah.
That the priests can't marry. And neither can the nuns. They can't marry. They just dug up a graveyard about 10 years ago down in Louisiana or somewhere, a nunnery where the nuns lived. Behind that, they found about 100 graves with babies buried in them.
Yep.
Why? Because it was okay for the nuns to sleep with the priests, but they couldn't marry. But if they got pregnant, bury the baby.
Wow.
Now, a lot of those babies were probably babies that were abandoned. It used to be you could bring a baby in a basket, put it on the church doorstep, and the church would take it in, Catholic or Protestant or Baptist or whatever. Yeah, and take care of it. But it was not unusual for the nuns to be sleeping with the priests.
Right.
Wow, I never.
Well, yeah, because they made it a law. The priest cannot get married. In the United States, the priests want to get married, and so do some of the nuns. All right? A nun wears a wedding ring. She's married to Christ. That's why they wear a wedding ring. Right? And so, but if you can contain, he's going to tell them, no, it's better if you remain single as a Christian, because now you can give all your time to God and not have to worry about taking care of a wife and children and that. He said, but if you can't contain, if you burn in lust, and for the men especially, it becomes a physical problem. He said, it's better to marry than to burn.
Mm-hmm.
He said, because you can't serve God if all the time you're going, oh, I can't look over there. Why? Well, because there's a woman in a bikini. You know, when I'm driving down the road, I've said this for years. When I'm driving down the road, and sometimes in the summertime, bam, there they are. There's a woman walking down the street in a bikini. You know what my reaction? I had to force myself. I look straight ahead. You can't help the first look,
Right.
but you can help the second look.
Yeah.
I look straight ahead and say, yes, God, you did a good job on that one. Now I think I'm going to go home and talk to my wife. And just keep on driving. I have to make a joke out of it.
Yeah.
That's how I contain.
I love it.
What before I was saved, I was picking guitar in church up in Washington, and I told the preacher the stupidity of us. I told the preacher, I said, but Pastor, what do I do if I find myself in bed with a woman? Because I was still a musician picking in the bars. I said, what do I do if I find myself in bed with a woman and she's not my wife? Well, in the first place, don't be stupid. You're not going to find yourself in bed with a woman.
Right.
You went there, all right? He didn't say that, though.
Right.
I said, what do I do? He said, before you do anything, I'll tell you what to do. Get out of bed, get down on your knees, and start praying out loud. And she'll either get down and start praying with you and nothing will happen, or she'll run off. He said, but if you get out of bed on your knees and start praying before you do anything, nothing's going to happen. That struck my funny bone. And that took that problem away. I'm not saying it doesn't come up. I might be 76, but I'm not dead. It's like guys that say, oh, well, it doesn't bother me to see a woman, you know, and naked or in provocative dress, then I'm going to call you a doctor because there's something physically wrong with you. You're not normal physically. There's something wrong. It takes an effort to turn away from it. But that's why Christian liberty. We are at liberty from sin. In other words, we can control it. But before we were saved, it controlled us.
Yeah.
Maybe I didn't do this sin, I didn't do that sin, I didn't do that sin, but I sure did that one a lot. Why? I was slave to that sin. And so he's telling them it's better to marry than to burn. But if you can contain, it's better then because you give all your time to God. So you can't make a rule that, like the priest, can't be married. That's why I did some research, and I think it was 1988, somewhere back in the late 80s, 75% of the men applying for the priesthood were homosexuals. 75%. The Catholic Church now says it's okay to be a homosexual. Just don't practice it.
What?
Yep, don't do the physical deed. But it's okay to be a it's okay to be a homosexual, just don't do it. It's okay to drink, but just don't get drunk. See, that's how you get people in. Give them some slack. Well, the only problem is if you give a mouse a cookie, he's going to want a glass of milk to go with it. Okay? So that's out of a movie I saw years ago, and I loved it. But it's true. You know, you give a mouse a cookie, he's going to want a glass of milk to go with it. Okay, so God has instructed us as to its need for the marriage intimacy, and why, as well as the contributing factor of the moral climate in which one lives, like today. It's just, hey, it's okay. Two consenting adults. They're not hurting anybody. No, they're hurting everybody. The moral climate in which one lives being a consideration as to whether to marry or not, and shows how social climate can even make celibacy a torture. General principles. Now we're going to get to the book. 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verses 1 through 9. There is nothing wrong with celibacy for some. Verse 1. Chapter 9, let me get there.
General. Because
Yeah.
the blank.
I got it.
Yeah, general principles. Is that your blank?
Yeah.
General. Okay. Celibacy, there's nothing wrong with celibacy for some. Verse 1. Am I not an apostle? Am I not free? Have I not seen Jesus Christ our Lord? Are not ye my work in the Lord? Okay, wait a minute. Sorry, I'm in the wrong chapter. It's chapter 7.
Oh, I was like,
I was over in 9, and that was not it. 7:1. I saw that 9, 1 to 9, and I turned to 9. Chapter 7, verse 1. Here we go. Now concerning the things whereof you wrote unto me. So he's saying, okay, now that we took care of your real biggest problems, let's take care of the rest of them. So this is what you wrote unto me. Now concerning the things whereof you wrote unto me, it is good for a man not to touch a woman. He said, oh, that's a good thing. Okay. In the textbook, number 2, but for others it will lead to sin. Verse 2. Nevertheless, to avoid fornication. Okay, now we're talking about guys that are having a problem with sex. They want to sleep with somebody. All right? So he said, it's good for a man not to touch a woman. Verse 2, nevertheless, to avoid fornication, if that's your problem, let every man have his own wife, and let every woman have her own husband. Okay, so he's talking to the men and the women both. Some women cannot do without that physical touching, rubbing the arm, stroking the neck. Maybe sex, maybe not, but the intimacy. And so for a man, it's intimacy, but it's the sex. But for a woman, it's generally the intimacy. Yeah. Maybe the sex, yes, maybe not. But he said for men and women to avoid fornication. Why? Well, because if the woman wants intimacy, if she wants a man to show her love, she's going to give sex to get love. And still fornication. Just like the man gives love, he treats a woman. When I was a musician for 25 years, do you know what the best seduction tool in the world is? Tenderness. Tenderness. Treat a woman tender. Treat her like you appreciate her. Treat her like you love her. Just don't jump in bed. Touch them. Hug them. Love them. Show them love. In counseling, I teach the men. I said, do you know the best way to improve your sex life? Help your wife wash the dishes when you get home from work. She's been working all day with them kids in the house. If she's not working outside of the home, then if she is working outside of the home, she comes home and the husband won't help her. I said, show her that you love her. Wash the dishes. Tell her, why don't you go out with the gals for a couple hours? You know, go down to the coffee shop, have a bite to eat. I'll watch the kids for you. Women love it. Why? You're showing. What if I told my wife I love her and then I didn't come home for 3 days?
Yeah, you show some love.
Yeah, I'm really showing her I love her. But I told her I loved her. That ought to be enough. No, women don't want to just hear it. They want to experience it. So that's what he's saying. It's good if a man doesn't touch a woman, but to avoid fornication, then let the man have his own wife and let every woman have her own husband. She shouldn't have to go somewhere else to feel loved. She should feel loved and see it and feel it at home, not just hear it. So he said to avoid fornication, go ahead and get married. Back in the textbook, this verse is also a strong commandment for fidelity in marriage. Let him have his own wife, let her have her own husband, nobody else. Number 3 in the textbook, the physical relationship, verses 3 through 5. The husband and wife belong to one another, not in a dictatorial manner, but in a reciprocal submissiveness to fulfill one another's physical needs. It's not one way the dictator, the man says, you're going to give me sex when I want it. She says, yeah, but I would like a little bit of loving and hugging and kissing and, you know, touching and foreplay, whatever you want to call it. We're adults, so you allow me the liberty. Men are microwaves and women are crock pots.
We like it simmer. They like it
20 to 30 minutes. 20 to 30 minutes of slow cooking before the microwaving. All right, men are they had a book out by that title. Men are microwaves, and women are crockpots. So it's to be a reciprocal submissiveness to fulfill one another's needs. You're supposed to know what helps get your wife in the mood. The man is required by God to find out how to fulfill his wife's needs. And the wife is commanded by God to find out how to fulfill her husband's needs. But it's got to be a willing submissiveness, not dictatorial, come on, woman.
Yeah, no doubt.
You know, if I was a woman and he did that to me, you know what happened? I'd tell him, hang on just a second, because I'm going to backhand you into the middle of next week. I wouldn't put up with it. Why would a man expect a woman to put up with that? And so, the physical relationship, verses 3 through 5. Let the husband render unto the wife due. It's her due. It's her right. To render unto the wife due benevolence. And likewise also the wife unto the husband. She owes him, and he owes her. So if we want to get the job done, isn't it better if we work together? Instead of one trying to do, force the other one. No. Why don't we just work together and make this whole thing work? Render unto the wife due benevolence, and likewise also the wife unto the husband. The wife hath not power of her own body. Boy, I'll tell you, people hate that today. They do. They hate that. Well, no, I got the right. But the wife hath not power of her own body, but the husband. And likewise also the husband hath not power of his own body, but the wife. If she says, no, we need a little hugging and kissing, and stroke my face, rub my neck, kiss me, some intimacy here. That's her right. And the husband has, in God's eyes, has absolutely nothing to gripe about. That is his job. Her job is to find out his needs and help meet him. Her job is to find his needs. Then his job is to find out her needs and meet him. And together, they can make the marriage work. Verse 5, defraud ye not one the other, except it be with consent for a time. In other words, you can decide as a husband and wife to be celibate for a time for maybe a specific purpose. That you may give yourself to fasting and prayer. If you're going to be fasting, you may be fasting from food, but you may be fasting from the intimacy too. And so that, if you both agree, but if one says, I want to, and the other one says, no. Well, okay, then we don't. We'll fast from food or something else. Because he has to render unto her due benevolence, her needs, and she has to do the same for him. But with consent, defraud you not one the other, except it be with consent for a time, that you may give yourselves to fasting and prayer, and to come together again, that Satan tempt you not for your incontinency. In other words, if we just say, no, you're going to do this, or it's not, we're not going to sleep together anymore until you do what I say. And he says, that Satan tempt you not. She's putting her husband out there, and Satan's going, okay, I got a good shot at this one now. Well, he was sleeping with his wife. I didn't have a very good shot, but I got a good shot at him now. And if the woman is then tempted by Satan, he'll go, I'm going to bring one of them smooth-talking men around. That's going to flim-flam her and going to show her tenderness, going to show her some love, show her some intimacy, touching, not necessarily the sex, but that's what he's leading towards. And Satan's going to tempt her, and I'll tell you what, ladies, he's going to bring someone around that you're going to think is the most wonderful guy you ever met in your life. He's going to treat you nice, he's going to treat you tender, and he's going to make you think, I'm not after anything except I love you and I want to hold you. That's all there is. He's just a smooth-talking man. That's all he is. We used to call him a silver-tongued devil.
Mm-hmm. My grandma used to.
Yeah, I'm 76. I'm probably the same age as your grandma. My grandkids are your age. I just got my 14th great grandchild here about 2-3 weeks ago. We're almost 15 minutes late. I'm sorry, I didn't look at the clock. We're way over.
Well, we're still listening.
I know, but we got to stop there. So we'll start.
B.
The husband and wife belong to one another, not in a dictatorial manner, but in a reciprocal submissiveness to fulfill one another's physical needs. And then on page 25, only by consent can one or the other practice sexual abstinence, even for spiritual reasons, because it gives Satan an opening through which to launch an attack. And we'll start with number 4 next week. Okay? Any questions or comments? I enjoy the course. I apologize. I didn't realize what time it was till I glanced up there. I get carried away. Okay. No question. But it's so much for today. But it was written 2,000 years ago. Mm-hmm. And people go, well, there's no God, and he can't be omnipotent and know the future and know everything, or omnipotent, all-powerful, omniscient, knowing the future. Well, that's funny because this reads like today's newspaper or some soap opera on TV. It's just exactly like it. And that's why I wanted it in, because it's becoming a problem, not just in the charismatic churches. In the Pentecostal churches, they've been a joke going around for 20, 30 years about the infidelity of their pastors. After all, they're only human. He didn't mean anything by it. Well, he committed adultery, and he should not be a pastor if he's doing that. And so, anyway.
With the celibacy, it's only torture after a while. Not like after a while, but at first.
Oh, at first, yeah, it's kind of a relief.
I want to say the first 2 months of me being celibate was the hardest. And then after that, like now, I've been celibate 8 months, so it's like. When a
man dies, the widow, if they're older, like in their 60s or 70s, generally the women don't remarry. They don't. A lot of them do, but in general, they don't tend to remarry. And they'll outlive the husband by 15 years. These are statistics. However, if the woman dies and the man does not remarry, he's usually dead within 5 years. So there's something there, some kind of connection. She can live without a man for 15 years. She'll outlive the dead husband by 15 years. But if his wife dies, he'll generally only outlive her by 5 years if he does not remarry. There's got to be a reason for that. And I think it has a lot to do with what we're studying. Okay, so we is done for the night. And Jerry, would you mind dismissing us in prayer?
No.
Okay, Sue?
Okay.
All right, sure.
Okay, Lord, come before you tonight. Thank you for the classes. Thank you for the church ministries, Lord, the people, the student teachers. Thank you, Lord God. Take us home in safety. Bring us back again. Bless us. Thank you, Lord. In Jesus' name we pray.
Amen. Did you all get the critical thinking textbook?
Yeah.
Everybody got a copy? You got one, Sister Sue?
No, I don't got one.
Okay. Because that'll be the last class tomorrow night.
Okay, how far do you want us to read in that?
Just maybe 5 or 6 pages, It'll probably be like tonight. Look at how long the introduction took.
Yeah, and I still gotta go to Arby's.
I'm not going to charge it for that one because we were going to have, let me get this offline. We were going to start the Greek class, but I wanted to finish 1 Corinthians and get into critical thinking, so
are we still going to do the Greek?
Not this semester.
Okay.
Maybe next year.